You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Stop laughing! And when I do, start fucking.
Also, y'all did some nasty ass jokes on my ass, too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You fucking guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. And today I am pleased to introduce you to the breaking of Joe Matarese. And a lot of you may not know that name or why we would be talking about him, but that's the point of today's episode, is to introduce you to a topic like that. Probably our most obscure topic yet, I would think.
Definitely.
Unless you include Peter Schickley. Although he was not obscure to the board of the Grammys. So I'm saying this is the most obscure topic we've done, but I think it's worth doing, and I'll explain why in a minute. But first, I just want to remind you guys to go to blindmike.net. That's where you can find all the free links. If you want to support the show for free, we appreciate it. Like, subscribe, 5 stars, all that good stuff on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. All those links are at blindmike.net. And if you'd like to go the extra mile and get Why Are You Laughing episodes a week early on the Patreon, as well as the other stuff we got going on there, then subscribe to the Patreon. And you can find that link at blindmike.net as well. Also, new merch up. New Gearhead winter merch. And that joins the Why You Laughing Blind Mike project stuff that's already up there. So plenty going on at blindmike.net. So make sure you check it out. And I think in the new year, I've mentioned this the last couple of weeks, we will have bonus episodes, mini episodes. I think I'll do like weekly recommendations for Why You Laughing, things you guys should check out. Another idea I thought to do for the Patreon was, I mentioned this a few weeks ago on the show, I think, and I haven't figured out how to incorporate it into an episode. So we might just do it as individual things on the Patreon. When someone said put a poll up, like, this versus this, like either different episodes we've done or things we will cover. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a pretty good idea. So we might do that on the Patreon as well.
Yeah, because you actually can do polls on Patreon, and you can upload videos directly to Patreon now, which is new.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
My God. The changes we're going through, folks. It's unbelievable. So,
if only they would allow us to go live on Patreon. That's the only thing that's missing now.
I'm sure it's coming.
Someday.
Blindmike.net. Check it all out, baby. And now you're probably wondering, who is this Joe Matarese fella? And this is how I'll describe today's episode. I have mentioned it to a few different people. Those who don't know who Joe Matarese is have said, okay, they seem a little skeptical. And those who do know who Joe Matarese is have said, fuck yes, because I'm about to send you guys down a rabbit hole. If you don't want your entire time to be consumed over the weekend by just looking up Joe Matarese clips and documentaries on YouTube, then, abandon ship now, because I have a feeling a lot of you will be going down this wormhole. So shout out and credit to a guy named Porcelain. Oh, you familiar with this guy, Craig?
I've watched all 3 parts of the Joe Matarese saga several times.
Yes. So Porcelain is a guy who makes documentaries about the comedy world, and they're very well done. They're done like real documentaries, honestly. They're very well done. And he also adds very funny commentary, like his descriptive adjectives and things make it a very funny watch. So Porcelain does a great job. And one of his main subjects has been Joe Matarese, a 3-part documentary on Italian-American comedian Joe Matarese. And Porcelain essentially broke this guy down and made him the first, Stuttering John, Brendan Schaub, these guys that are being trolled on the internet now. The original version of that, I think, and you could probably find examples before this, but the first one I remember seeing as this target of an onslaught of trolling and mockery and, hours of dedication into different forms of content. I think the godfather of that, or at least one of them, was Joe Matarese. And Porcelain, by the way, I've mentioned before, one of the reasons I started doing this podcast, or was like inspired to do this podcast, was I listened to Bill Simmons' Rewatchables podcast and was like, there's really nothing like that for comedy. Another kind of inspiration I had was guys like Porcelain and Beige Frequency, that their documentaries let me know, okay, there is an audience for even the most obscure subjects you could possibly imagine. So to tell you a little bit about who Joe Matarese is, he's basically just a working club comic for a lot of years. Started in the late 80s. He was never a name you would know. He was a guy, you might see at a Funny Bone or a Laugh Hut around the country. And that's pretty much all he was until about 2017. Or I guess I should say 2014, because that's where our first clip starts. So Joe Matarese got on America's Got Talent, and he did very well the first time he was on. And this is, I think, Howard's first year of hosting, when Howard started on America's Got Talent, possibly his second year. But there's clips of Heidi Klum saying how much she loves Joe Matarese, and all the judges are big fans of Uncle Joe. And then they have him on for a second round. And I don't know, are you familiar with America's Got Talent at all, Craig? Have you ever watched it?
Yep.
Do they bring them back like to not perform in front of an audience or something?
This is confusing because I've only seen like theaters.
Yeah, so it seems very confusing. His first performance was in front of a theater, so I don't know why this wasn't. And it's long before COVID, so get that out of your mind. It was 2014. So I don't know why this is not in front of an audience, unless the sole reason was to humiliate this poor bastard. So this is Joe's second appearance on America's Got Talent and the end of his run.
As you know, I'm 46 years old, 2 kids, which has been killing me. I gotta be honest. When I had 1 kid, it was so much easier. All I had to do was drink like 2 beers at dinner, and I'd be like, where's he going? He just broke that thing I loved. Another thing is potty training is brutal. I didn't know this when I was having kids. My son's just bent over, pants down, just waiting for me. And I just had enough, I'm like, you're 6. I look at him, like, you're 6 years old. Like, why do I still have to wipe you? I swear to God, this is his answer. He goes, because it's gross. I'm like, oh, all right, well, let me do it then. That makes sense. You guys are being tough on me on purpose. I could feel that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Oof, a brutal. I don't know. I really don't understand what's going on there, because as you can tell, that tells you a lot about Joe, right?
It's your fault.
It tells you he's a family man, he's a dad, and that's what a lot of his comedy is about. Kind of a Sebastian Maniscalco light, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's typically dirty, but he's clean enough to be on America's Got Talent, obviously. But it also tells you about his awkward uncomfortableness when he says, like, I feel like you guys are fucking with me, basically. Which, to be fair to him, I think they kind of were. I can't think of another reason they would format that.
You're performing to 4 people. One is Howard Stern, the other is Howie Mandel.
Yeah, and they're seemingly purposely not laughing. And another thing that shows you is when you take the laughs out of a room, just how uncomfortable comedy is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even if, whoever, Louis C.K. was doing his act to an empty room and you watched it, you'd be like, this is That's why Drew Michael, do you know who that is?
No.
He put out a special on HBO that was to an empty room. And it's like, this is a bad idea, man, because it's going to expose even your decent jokes as for what they are. But
I think I know 2. Maria Bamford did a special in her living room to her parents only. And
yeah, but Maria Bamford's funny enough, and it's quirky and weird.
Yeah,
like for some reason that fits with Maria Bamford, but most people can't get away with it.
And Harlan Williams did a special like on the side of a mountain to nobody.
Oh, that I imagine that's fun, but
they've all been terrible. Is my point.
Okay, so that's 2014, and the only reason I heard about this and learned about Joe Matarese because the AGT fan base is not like comedy fans. And if there was a comedian that bombed that no one had ever really heard of, I don't know that would make the rounds on, the comedy subreddits and things like that, which we'll get into. But the reason I heard about this bombing was because Joe Matarese started going on radio shows and podcasts and talking about how NBC screwed him, which is another characteristic of Joe's, where he wants everyone to like him. He wants you to know that he's not this horrible comedian. He needs everyone to like and appreciate him, which, believe me, is a characteristic I can understand and sympathize with. But that's the only reason I had heard of Joe Matarese. A couple years later, he starts going on the Anthony Cumia show. He's on the Artie Quitter podcast a lot. I think he had done Jim and Sam, things like that. Mm-hmm. So he's making the rounds on that type of comedy circuit. These podcasts that appeal to specifically like comedy audiences. So he cashes in a few favors. And that's where our episode really starts today. And this might be a long one because I started doing an episode about Joe Matarese as a whole and kind of the breaking of Joe Matarese. But today we're going to focus on the one thing, the one episode of a talk show that really broke Joe Matarese, because as I was pulling clips, I was like, we're going to have too many to do a full episode. So your guys' assignment as listeners today is to let me know, based on this episode, should there be a Joe Matarese part 2? And if so, that will be the first Patreon exclusive episode, if you guys are interested in that.
Literally, this podcast that we're basically about to break down is maybe the podcast I've listened to the most in my life.
It's hard to look away from it. And I'll tell you, even as I was pulling clips, this is the first time pulling clips for this show that I've stopped. Usually I'll fast forward just looking for the bits that I need. Mm-hmm. This is the first time that I've stopped and just watched because I was laughing so much.
It's very funny.
So Joe Matarese wanted to do a talk show. He's pitching a talk show. This is like a pilot that's supposed to be like a Donahue type show, or not quite Jerry Springer, but in that realm of daytime TV. You know what I mean? Dr. Phil, I guess.
It's based off like one of his other shows where it's literally just a therapy session for him.
Yeah. So it's called Fixing Joe, and it's predicated on Joe Matarese takes medication. Now, I take medication, Craig. Do you know what kind of medication I'm on?
Prozac, something like that.
See, no, you're wrong. You're in the it's anti-depression and anxiety, but you don't know what it's called because I don't talk to you about it. I don't find it to be an interesting subject. Mm-hmm. Joe on his podcast would break down. He's like, guys, I cut down from 20 milligrams to 10 milligrams of, Wellbutrin or whatever the fuck. And it became this obsession with him where he thought the most interesting thing about him was the medication he takes and his mental health. So his idea for a talk show entitled Fixing Joe was that he do a show where he has guests on, comedian guests, who come on and give him advice, which doesn't seem like a great idea because comics aren't always the best at giving advice unless, you're setting out to do that on a show. So you would think maybe Joe gives advice to these comics, but no. He wants you to do the work.
He wants you to give him advice. And he decides to have the 3 best people ever for that on.
It's an odd choice. We'll reveal that in a few moments. But first, let's hear the intro, I guess, or how he sets it up.
This one's called The Crowd. This setup's next.
Yeah, so this is just a taste. Oh, I guess this is where we find out who's on the show, because you get a taste of who they're there for. Is this a Joe Matarese crowd, or do they maybe get wind of who's on the dais?
Who's a Fixing Joe listener here? Who's a listener? I got 8 listeners. Awesome. So you're all Cumia fans? Cumia? Do you watch me on Cumia? Anthony Cumia, awesome, love him. Artie Quitter. And I was just asking Jim Norton's new show on Sirius XM.
So it seems, I don't have my applause meter out, but it seems like the crowd is mostly there for not Joe Matarese.
Correct.
Based on the numbers. So you hear the list of people there. Jim Norton, notoriously deviant. Like, he's one of the first guys to make a career out of his sexual proclivities and admit to having, fetishes, for lack of a better word, involving transgender people and being pissed on and all kinds of, perverse shit, so to speak. So he's on that list. Anthony Cumia, who literally at this time, during this period, was on trial for domestic violence. And Artie Lange, who I probably don't need to even tell you his laundry list of reasons why he should not be on an advice show as the one giving advice. So this is the panel that he has assembled. And let's hear a little more about the setup of the show and Joe's description of it.
We got it all covered. It's total podcast and radio listening audience. This is awesome. Yes. So I wanted to sit down and just kind of talk it out so you can get the more long form thing that's going on. So basically, I had a friend have a stroke. Hilarious. I had a friend have a stroke last week, and he was one of these guys that was always working, right? Just going all the time. Like, he would come on vacation with us, my mother-in-law's fiance, right? This Indian guy. Super great guy. His name's Noggin, right? So this is like the Noggin podcast, I guess. He has a stroke, and I pictured him like working while he was laying on the table, stroking out, like, give me my phone, give me my iPhone. I have to call India,
I have to call India? What does that mean?
I think he sensed he was bombing.
Operator, India. So this is already not a good start. You can hear there Joe is flailing a little bit. He does not have control of this crowd. Believe me, that comes up. And another thing that is mentioned that you guys should know, just so you have the full context here, is Joe paid for this, I believe, out of pocket. I don't know if there was a production company backing him, but his goal was to get this on television. And like I said, compete with Dr. Phil and that sort of TV. So he wanted to get this on TV. So he paid for a band. There's a band there that is, if he was paying them, whatever it was too much. And there's cue cards. So he's trying to set this up like real, a real television shoot. It seems like the comedians were not aware of that going in.
Right.
But, you tell me the vibe you pick up. Is the next clip when Anthony's introduced?
No, it's called Why We're Here.
Okay. All right. Oh, Jesus, we still haven't gotten to the setup yet. Joe, tell us. Take it away.
Whoops.
Yeah, so I'm trying to just basically figure out with these guys tonight that I'm going to bring up, and I thank them so much for doing this, how to slow down, man. Because I don't want to be that guy that's just going. Like, I think it's because, I don't know if it's a showbiz thing or an everybody thing. I've been chasing the comedy dream. They're going to shit on me for this one. Oh, just opening, it's like an open wound. Chasing it hard, man. All of us up here.
The crowd's already excited for him to be shit on, as you could tell there.
Yeah.
But also, I like the idea of soliciting the help of a heroin and cocaine addict to tell you how to calm down. Hey, Artie Lange, how do I get a hold of myself? And this is already at a time, I think Crashing is just starting. So it's a time where Artie is like kind of on the brink of where he was still Artie Lange and still has his comedic timing and everything.
Just less of a nose.
Yeah, he's getting close. This is after his nose is all fucked up. So he's getting close to the end of his brilliant run here. So why he assembled these guys, I was going to say I don't know why. I do know why. It's because they're probably the most famous people he has enough of a relationship with to solicit this kind of help for free.
Definitely.
And so that's why he got these on. But Joe didn't realize Joe's going to want to run a serious show.
Mistake.
And that's a huge mistake, because if you listen to Opie and Anthony or Howard, these are some of the greatest ball busters of all time, really. You could argue that, those two shows kind of invented ball breaking podcasting, which is has a huge market today. These are some of the Mount Rushmore faces of that cause. And Joe is like, hey, how do I calm down? How do you help me? So let's get into it a little more. Now Anthony comes on stage.
Yep.
All right, let's hear him introduce Mr. Cumia.
I never saw a space launch that had a preamble like this podcast has. Wow. It's awesome. And you invite me to a show where it's like, how do I slow down? Oh, yeah, I'm the guy for that. Yeah, I'm the guy for that. Awesome. That's right. Let me tell you, after my last court appearance at the end of the month, how Anthony slows the fuck down.
So even the guests are like, why am I here? I don't think they fully knew why they were being brought on here. I don't think they certainly didn't know it was supposed to be like a serious type of show. And you can hear Joe kind of like fake laughing there, which to me indicates like, I want to appease these guys, but also I'm praying they kind of do as I say and we'll follow suit here.
Yep. It doesn't quite go his way at all.
No. So now I think all three guys are on stage, right?
Yeah. This one's called Joe Starts to Struggle.
We're out of the gates early. And by the way, to reference Anthony's joke there, the preamble, that's like, I think like 7 minutes into the show before Anthony gets on stage. So there's a full like a monologue and the band plays. There was a lot of setup to what this is, which I guess for a pilot of a TV show you have to do, but it seemed a little unnecessary. I felt like you could get into it a little quicker.
Joe's biggest mistake was having an audience at this thing.
Oh, for sure, because they're playing to the audience.
Correct.
They are, and it's an audience of, as we learned with the applause meter, comedy fans,
right.
Not therapy fans.
Right.
So this is already Joe starts to stumble with all three guys on stage.
Honestly, you probably in your relationships get the opposite that like a married guy gets. Like a married guy gets.
You mean head?
I'm like a volleyball setter up here.
This isn't true. You're teeing it up for this story, right?
Yeah. It couldn't be harder for me, but seriously.
It couldn't be harder for me. You assembled this team, Joe.
This is all you're doing.
This is where we're 5 minutes in and he's like, this is a difficult task, but you created it. And so Artie, like you said, I think even in just a room with these four, Artie's going to be playing to Anthony, wanting to make Anthony and Jim laugh. Jim's going to want to make Anthony and Artie laugh. Anthony's going to want to make Jim and Artie laugh. Mm-hmm. So,
and don't forget, Jim and Anthony did a radio show together forever.
Oh, and that's something that should be mentioned too, is that Jim and Anthony did a radio show together forever and have been apart for about a year now.
Right.
So this is almost like a reunion of sorts. Like Joe got these two guys together who have done nothing but bust each other's balls for 10 years and said, hey, give me some earnest advice. And so Artie, right out of the gates, is not taking it seriously, which leads to the other guys, obviously joining in.
Yep.
Everyone get in touch with you. Now you can make calls on planes. And you get people get in touch with you on planes.
So that, they will answer his questions and try to give advice. That's what's happening now, is Artie is trying to give advice on, slowing down. And the plane thing that he's talking about is, you can't escape your phone. People can contact you even when you're, on a flight now. And so they will get serious, but inevitably it devolves into what we're about to hear.
There's no, you can't go, look, I got to go do something bad. I have to go do everything bad. And while I'm doing it, I don't want to get in time. I want to go fuck a whore. I want to gamble. I want to make a bet. I want to do drugs. I want to drink. I want to smoke. I want to say the N-word. And everything.
I could, hey.
See, you did it in front of people.
What do you mean, did it?
I said, I want to do everything wrong. And you can't do that anymore. A man has to blow off steam, you know, and you got to do bad shit. And there's no chance to do it anymore.
You guys have a really interesting definition of blowing off steam.
Here's a girl named Steam. Girl, use the term loosely.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, like, you know, if you got to bet on a game and a black quarterback throws an interception, you know, African American doesn't cut it.
Or you're cut off in your car.
Or you see one with a white girl. Sorry.
So, Jim.
Good luck selling this. Does the Klan have a network?
The reason I cut that off where I did and left that all in is because I kind of wanted to show Joe trying to get it back on the rails and already just saying, good luck selling this. Because you forget for a minute when you're listening to that, you forget this is supposed to be like a serious show.
I forgot. Artie still actually does have his nose in this one.
Oh, this is before the glass?
Yeah, because that actually happened when he was at Cumia.
Okay. What was I going to say? God damn it. Oh, yeah. So remember a few weeks ago when our good pal Danny Polishchuk was on.
Mm-hmm.
And a few times after Peter Schickley's name came up, I would try to revert the conversation back to what our subject was supposed to be, Adam Sandler. And then my internet went out. And I was like, fuck. So it was just Craig and Danny for a minute. And then when I get back on, they're talking about Peter Schickley.
Good, he's gone.
That is the moment where I said, you know what? I threw up my hands. I said, this is not going to be a serious episode. We got to go with the Schickley thing. We got to spend the rest of the episode on Peter Schickley because that's what will entertain our guests. That's what will entertain Danny. So what we just heard was Joe Matarese's internet go out. And, you know, not that I have the greatest instincts in the world, but Joe Matarese doesn't even have Mike Geary level instincts. Because he will continue trying to get this horse back on track. So what's our next clip?
Learning about Jim.
Oh, well, that's it. I mean, that's important. We have to learn a little bit more about our guests. So here's Jim Norton.
So Jim, like, okay, I don't know you. I probably know you as well as I know Anthony. Like, I don't know you outside of comedy, really. So, like, I don't know, like, are you, like, in a relationship? Are you, like, on your phone all the time? I know you had the hooker thing. Like, is there a time that...
The hooker thing? No, that's all
set up.
But you really don't know Jim.
Yeah. I know you had that hooker phase you went through from 1968 to 2017 almost. And that thing where you think you're gay, but you're not sure. You know how it is, folks. As long as there's a dress on it, you're heterosexual.
A hooker phase. I'm in mine.
Would you say your daily life, though, is very high strung, or are you, like, you know how to shut it down and you...
Jesus Christ. Yeah, so... you know who I need? You know who should give me advice? The best person to give me advice? Someone I don't know. Joe Matarese is like, I barely know you. I know you about as well as another guy on the panel. Well, honestly, both of you should tell me how to live my life.
Honestly, though, if this was the show where he just had a panel come on and pummel him for the whole entire time, it would have sold in 2 seconds.
This is a great. Now what's happening is a great show. That was my. I should have gotten there. That was my point with the Schickley thing. Is if we just had comics on to find a way to divert the conversation, and then we just go down that rabbit hole, I think that would be a funny show.
Yeah.
Joe Matarese should have said to himself, like, well, you know what? This is getting huge. These guys are fucking killing. And honestly, as a guy who's listened to a lot of Anthony, Jim, and Artie individually, together, whatever, this might be the most they've killed on a show, period.
Ever.
like they are constantly zinging this fucking guy. So what Matarese should have said is, you know what? I'm the straight guy. I'm going to try and, keep it on track a little bit, but they're going to keep zinging me. So I got to roll with those punches. If I'm the straight guy here, I could have a huge career for myself. It's something that Opie never understood.
Nope.
And got very resentful of. But you got to at least give Opie this. It took him about 10 years to really get resentful of that. It took Joe Matarese about 10 minutes.
That's very true.
So we'll show you how that breaks down. What's our next clip?
This one is Honest Review.
Yeah, so the guys get the feeling in the room. They're aware of what's happening, and I think this is kind of a review of how the show's been so far.
So what did she do that you called her cunt though? What was happening?
It was.
Pause 1 second,
you really want to know?
Yeah.
And just start that clip over when we play it. But Joe brings up that he called his wife a cunt. And what you heard there already is he goes, you really want to know? Because even he's lost confidence in this thing. But that's the source of the argument that they try to wade through, is that he called his wife a cunt for some reason, and it started an argument, and they're trying to get to the bottom of that.
So what did she do that you called her cunt though? What was happening?
It was. You really want to know?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Did she critique the show?
It was.
Joe, I think you need a new theme song. Shut up, cunt. Cue cards, Joe.
I called her a cunt. It was on the cue card.
Yes. Turns out it was can't, but they forgot the apostrophe.
If I give you an honest review, you'll be calling me cunt in 5 seconds.
So they are ripping the shit out of not just the premise of the show, but the setup around it, the band, the cue cards,
everything about format,
everything about it. They are ripping the shit out of, which again is getting a huge reaction. And Joe starts to get resentful of that rather than going with it, which I should say, as much as I'm going to shit on Joe, I can imagine that's a tough thing where you have this mindset of this being one thing and it goes completely the opposite way. I can imagine that being hard to adjust to on the fly.
If you put me on stage with these three, it's going to be worse than this episode was.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But at least you might have the sense to be like, I got to take this beating. These legends are ripping me. I just got to go with it.
I've never taken a beating in my life.
What's next?
More marriage advice.
Oh, this is good. Yeah, so we're trying to get to the bottom of this marriage thing. He called his wife a cunt. Why?
I'm doing like comedy math in my head where I'm going, is anyone who knows my wife in the audience? Like that's I'm all of a sudden afraid of that.
That black guy.
I love how people think racism is over. That just 300 people just laughed at that.
300? What did everyone in the audience laugh twice?
I was trying to help Joe out. This is like I could see Ellen's company buying this.
I'll tell you you can have fun with it. I'll just give you the real story.
Dude, you're like the Lusitania sitting in the middle of the sea.
My wife did two really stupid things back to back. Like
married you and then
Jesus. Now, first of all, I love that Artie is the one, and that tells you a little about the comedic genius of Artie Lange and the way his mind worked for a long time, where no matter how fucked up he is or what kind of state he's in, he was always the one to bring it back to that center of like, I could see Ellen buying this. Yeah, yes. I think you're going down the right road, Joe. Good call. But also that line from Anthony, which is a stingingly quick line where he goes,
it's insane how quick his brain works.
Anthony and Norton and Artie, honestly, these three guys might be some of the quickest I've ever heard in my life, which you kind of need that in radio, you know, because everything's on the fly.
Right.
But that stingingly quick line by Anthony where he says, the two mistakes my wife did, and Anthony says, marry you, and that is the type of line I heard so many comics on the receiving end of. Rich Voss, Bob Kelly, whoever has been in the Opie and Anthony studios.
It's never not funny.
It's impossible that Joe Matarese didn't know that if I bring up my wife, first of all, I'm the wrong one. I have to know that I'm going to be the one in the wrong because these guys are going to hammer the shit out of me and call me the idiot. They're not going to mock my wife, who they don't know. They're going to mock me.
Right.
So, what are we going to?
What was the argument?
Oh, yeah. So for Christ's sake, let's get back on track here. Why did he call this poor woman a cunt?
If this were your Eat True Hollywood story, it would say, coming up, Joe invites Anthony Cumia. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. What happened?
What was the second thing?
Yeah.
We got an hour to kill.
Oh, shit.
Why were you arguing about what?
It was, first off, she got in a car accident. She came home.
Holy shit.
She came home.
You start saying funny shit now?
Well,
I know how she feels. I got booked on one.
It is a brutal onslaught. This is a hammering like I've never seen before.
She feels I was booked on one.
Joe Matarese had the misfortune. This is why this show was a perfect storm for guys like Porcelain or Mike David from Red Bar, who became a big, what's the word I'm looking for? Joe Matarese became a big target of his. He was a big tormentor of Joe Matarese.
Yeah.
The Opie and Anthony subreddit, places like that. It was the perfect storm for these guys because not only did Joe have such a dismal failure of an idea, just a very bad idea for a talk show. I shouldn't say that. Formatted wrong. The premise itself is not terrible. Just the way he went about it was very bad. And also, he has these three guys on a night. It's I guess the opposite. I was going to say the Jordan flu game, but whatever the opposite of that is, where these guys are so lasered in. They are in pristine condition. I've never seen them like this.
Tip-top shape. Everything they say works.
And so, like, the Anthony, Jim, and Artie show, I don't know if that would work because there wouldn't be, like, a host to reel that in and kind of center it and focus them a little bit.
Well, Artie and Anthony didn't even work.
But that is the role that Joe Matarese is playing today. He is centering them. He doesn't realize he is the linchpin in this show being a success.
The Opie.
That's the beauty of watching this train wreck is that Joe doesn't realize he's integral to this process.
Oh yeah, if he's not doing what he's doing, and he actually, it's not as if he goes with them, it's not as funny as it turned out to be.
Exactly. So what's next?
We have Joe starts. This is my favorite part. Joe starts getting hostile.
Yeah, and this is where I would say, Joe, you're not playing this right.
And by the way,
you're getting bitchy. You're not rolling with the punches.
Yeah, when I say favorite part, it's just because as soon as he says it, I just go, "Oh, idiot!"
Yeah, and you also got to say, Joe's at this point, Matarese has been in comedy for I think he said 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're a veteran. You got to know that you are walking in to a gunfight with a plastic knife when you let this joke out. This is not a good enough line to think you're going to get the wheels back on track.
That's right.
Yeah, we got to make sure she's okay. I hope so. He called her a cunt. In the hospital. Am I going to be okay? I don't know, cunt. Are they poking my toes with a pin?
That was an 83 Dodge Dart, you cunt.
I had Rush's first album on cassette.
I guess the biggest slam is I'm married to a doctor and none of you can keep a woman.
Oh, no. So, married to a doctor. Too bad it's not Kevorkian.
Yeah, so Like, none of yous can keep a woman is not a great line, particularly like, I mean, you could say this for all of them, but I'll use Anthony as the example. He's a millionaire that fucks like younger women.
Yes.
Like, he's not depressed. And say what you want about it. I think it's weird that a fucking 60-year-old guy is dating women in their 20s or whatever. But he's not depressed about his romantic life. So it's not a great line to zing them with.
Right.
And I think they pick up on that. They didn't care for that line too much, and they took advantage of it.
Because it wasn't funny, and he was just trying to be like, fuck you.
Yeah, that was mopey. That was mopey Matarese, where he's like, whoa, I'm losing control of this show, so fuck you guys.
Matarese really reminds me of somebody I know.
Who's that?
He's on VG.
Oh, okay. I know. I thought you meant me for a second.
No.
All right. Let's very good show, people. Go listen. Here's the host, Joe Matarese. What's next?
So what happened? They keep asking.
Oh yeah, we got to find out what the hell happened.
This happened for like 20 minutes, I think, on the show.
2 days later, she comes walking in the kitchen. She goes, "Oh, I set up that pea pod thing." Well, okay, what's that? She's like, well, you know, you order the groceries. I set up Peapod. They're going to be delivering groceries tomorrow. I go, well, what time? She goes, I set it up between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. I go, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's when I'm getting the kids ready and I got to get them to school. And she's like, I did something nice for us. What's wrong with 6 in the a.m.? And then my son...
This is so much better than fucking random girls, right, guys?
As I said, Anthony was did not care for that line, the hostile line Joe let out too much.
No.
And also, the thing you got to remember is this is an advice show predicated on Joe's mental health and marital problems. And the big problem in his life that he's bringing to the table is that his wife ordered Peapod grocery delivery too early in the morning.
Yeah, she did two things. She ordered groceries so he didn't have to go to the store and got into a car accident.
Yeah, this bitch. Or cunt, as you might say. Yeah. And I should also add, I'm, particularly before I lived with my girlfriend, I was a single guy that does not drive. I would get Peapod a lot. It's not a difficult process. They hand you the groceries and you put them away. That's the long and short of what a Peapod order is. And that led to him calling her a cunt.
The thing too with that line about he's married to a doctor is if you want to start getting one-upsman-y on stage with these three, they're going to crush your career.
Well, and also you're giving them ammo. You're saying, like, I'm kind of a struggling comedian that wants this to work, half stay-at-home dad that's taking care of the kids, and my wife is a doctor. Well, then you're just going to be called a leech the entire show. Right.
That's my point, yeah.
Right. All right.
We have, the next one is called, this is a good one, Lessons on Connecting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So Jim's not able, none of these guys are really able to connect that well. They're socially distant or awkward. And Joe is going to cut to the, as we've seen, he's going to laser in on these guys and really cut to their core, I think.
Oh, whoops. Hold on.
Oh, boy.
This is kind of, well, we can say one of the things I think with everybody running like fucking crazy these days is that nobody's really connecting. I know this is like fun for you guys to slam the shit out of me.
Yes.
But
it actually is. I didn't think I'd like this as much.
No.
I can't think of anything more fun than this evening. This is actually awesome.
It's fun, but it's very disconnected, and that's why you're single. It's I'm serious.
No,
serious.
That's why I'm a comedian.
No, but this is like a podcast, and it's all right to slam.
I'm
the shit
single
out of me.
because of fat shaming.
No, but I feel like the world we're in now, that everybody's like a little fucking disconnected. No one has a real conversation. This doesn't feel like a real conversation.
This is how you wanted to have a real conversation?
Yeah, in front of a room full of people. And then you mentioned I called my wife a cunt. We're supposed to go. Let's get to it, Joe.
These guys are paying, what was it, $14 for a Rolling Rock?
Are you guys enjoying the show? That's as connected as you can be to an audience.
And if you think I have an
So that clip, I think, is probably the best description of where this night went very right and very wrong, depending upon who you ask.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they are connecting to the audience, and the audience is having a terrific time. Joe just had such a different mindset of what this would be. He had a different vision for this, and it's not going well. And also, he's not coming off well because now he's being bitchy.
Right.
At the beginning, like I said, he was kind of fake laughing, which, hey, that's not the ideal way to respond.
I will say,
at least he was pretending to have fun with it.
In Joe Matarese's defense, that laugh that you thought was fake is, I think, how he actually sounds when he laughs.
Okay, maybe. It just felt very, as he would say, distant, not connected.
Right. They might be all the Ritalin.
He's not like he's trying to, therapize, for lack of a better word. And these guys are having none of it. And there's like, subtle is probably too strong, but there's a little shit in there. Like Norton was basically saying, you're not behaving like a comedian. Mm-hmm. Like we are being comedians. And Artie to be, on point enough to be like, this is how you wanted to have a conversation? There's 150 people here getting shit-faced, paying an insane amount for alcohol. And you were like, let's have a really get down to business conversation.
Artie got a delayed laugh on his fat shaming line. But I loved it because it was funny and he was saying something serious and Joe didn't bite on it at all.
It brought everything to a halt.
It made me laugh.
All right. I know I keep saying what's next, but I do think the way these are titled are very important.
Yep. It's called We're Only Halfway Through.
So everything you've just heard, this is a 1 hour long podcast, this Fixing Joe. I think it's like an hour and 10 minutes.
Feels like 3 minutes.
This has only been the first half hour, every clip I've pulled from so far. We're only halfway through, and this is how it's going.
Yeah, we're 3/4 of the way through our clips, though.
Yes.
But seriously, do you have a problem connecting one-on-one?
Of course we do. You know that.
Right. Okay.
You told me about 20 years ago. That's why I'm on the radio.
I don't know what it is, but every comedian that I've met that is super fucking quick-witted, like all three of you guys, you're all single, and you have trouble in a fucking conversation.
Hold on. You think every comedian?
I'm serious.
Wait, no.
See?
He thinks I have trouble connecting. Tell him I don't.
No, that's true.
Jimmy says.
True. And every comedian
No, it's
I
not.
know.
It's wrong. It's actually wrong.
Every comedian I know who's not witty and not funny is married to a doctor.
So now it's getting like they're just going to now the show is focused on trashing.
Oh, killer.
And the reason I say we're only halfway through is because now we're at the point where like the wheels really seem like they're falling off, but Joe still manages to squeeze 40 minutes out of this.
I could listen to this for 5 hours.
Like I said, they're killing. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard them kill before. And a lot of it, I think, because they are, like, friendly with this guy, he's a fellow comic, they like him, whatever. For most of the rest of it, and this is why we're mostly through our clips so far, because for a lot of it, they do try and, like, help him out and, like, give him what he's looking for. And what you hear in the crowd is, like, silence, because everyone's like, hey, where'd the laughter go? Why isn't this the same podcast anymore?
Right.
But we're not quite there yet. What's next?
Fix this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the point of this show, is to fix Joe. This is something that should be fixed, I suppose.
Fixing Joe, this right now is what you should fix. The fact that you're getting resentful.
I'm not getting resentful.
Or uncomfortable.
No.
You know, having fun with you.
No, I know you. I'm not resentful. I swear to God, I'm not mad. I like that you're getting the laughs. I swear to God, I'm not.
Well, someone's
I'm not being a cunt.
Now, Norton, and I will say Norton's best strength as a broadcaster, and I wish he would do it more just as a fan. It's probably better for his mental health that he doesn't. But once he feels offended Once whatever, moral line has been crossed, whatever, his line is where he's like, well, kind of fuck you. Like, I don't think he dislikes Joe Matarese as a person or anything, but I think in this moment he's kind of like, fuck you. And that's when just the gloves are off. Like on Opie and Anthony, you would see it with even guys like Jesse Ventura, who could rip this little worm's head off when
he's a little worm.
When he felt like Jesse Ventura was, kind of being a dick to him, he was like, hey, fuck you. And he was very vocal about it. And so that's why I like that clip, because now these guys are really digging their heels in, I think. And honestly trying to be helpful to Joe and being like, hey, stop being resentful of this. Embrace it.
I won. It's funny that was about the Chris Kyle thing.
Oh, the Jesse Ventura thing?
Yeah, after he died.
Jesse Ventura was right, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But Chris Kyle never I'm like, dude, he just sued his wife when he just died. It was bad luck.
Anyways, this is not about Chris Kyle.
Nope.
Let's get back to business here.
This one's called Wrapping Up.
Oh, yeah. So, so we fast forward a while, right?
Yeah. There is still gold in there. Go listen.
Yeah. So, there's plenty of gold, but it calms down a little bit. It's not the rapid fire that we were just listening to. So, the show starts to calm down. We're coming to an end, and it's still disastrous.
Joe, you've lost control of the show.
I'm just checking emails now. Just getting shit done.
Holy shit.
See, he can't
we
stop. Go or what? It's been like 40
great.
minutes.
He can't stop.
This is great.
It's been an hour. What if I give this roll their money back? Can I go? It's been a fun hour.
Well, guys, thank you. I really feel better now.
Is that the end of it?
Call me later.
That was abrupt.
You want to just... It was abrupt?
The ending.
I don't know where we are for time.
Yeah, because the rest of the
We're
show's
at
been smooth.
9:37, but we start...
But it was like they kind of got back on track and tried to help him out a little. But at the end, he's still being kind of a cunt, as Jimmy said, where he's scrolling through his phone and he's like, I'm getting shit done. And it's like, Joe, this is your show. You should care about how this ends, because you could still chop, if you want it to go a certain way, whatever, you could still edit it in a way that is manageable for you to come across likable, You
could, but then that would make things probably even worse.
Right. But we'll get to that part as well. So, but yeah, it was abrupt. It was weird where they're kind of going along and all of a sudden he's like, all right, the show's over. But also simultaneously you hear Norton go, that was it? And Artie go, it's been an hour. Can we go home? So as you can tell, Artie wants to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah, his body language is all different.
He's itching. He is itching now. So I don't know what he's about to go do. But I think the next clip is him trying to get the fuck out, right?
No, this one's called Cut That Pot Out.
Oh, that's right. Well, yeah, like I said, you could edit this a certain way. Let's see what this is.
I was gonna send you guys. I was gonna take phone calls and all that, but I just feel.
How you gonna do that?
Can you take phone calls?
Well, people leave
How is that
voicemails.
done?
The people leave voicemails and
Take a couple. Let's see what they had to say.
But you
Come
guys,
on.
you guys will just.
No, I would love
You guys
to
can leave.
hear what they have to say.
You sure?
You guys can leave.
Yeah, let's hear what they have to say.
You're never in a great place where you're like, no, you leave and I'll do the show myself.
No.
With, mind you, can you imagine how furious that audience would have been?
Oh, imagine. I give him this. That takes balls to tell those three that need to get off his stage.
Yeah, get out of here. I'll take calls. Would have been. I mean, well, I say would have been.
Just wait a minute.
Will be a disaster on this show. But also, like I said, I just keep in mind that at least one of these guys has had about enough.
At least I got some fucking beauties.
Anthony, you haven't called me.
Is somebody's hearing this right now? Like
Not
outside this
now.
room?
No, these are they leave voicemails on the hotline.
When does
Make
it
fun of
air?
that. When does it air?
Yeah.
Probably never. I have the power of airing this.
You don't? Do you edit this down at all? This should just kind of be like.
Oh yeah, this will be edited.
Do you
down.
really? Do you really?
By the time it's done, I'm going to be getting all those laughs that you're getting.
That's kind of funny.
Edit it or not?
He's trying to be a little more playful, although you can tell he's pissed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But Yeah, you can tell his wheels are spinning of like, how do I save this? When, like we said, he easily could have done this in a way where it's like, I somewhere would have bought it if you even just sold it as comics beating the shit out of him. Yeah. It wouldn't have been quite as good. But if you could somehow sell these three guys and coming back to beat the shit out of you every week.
Or they just have commentary on every single show he does.
Right.
Like one of those VH1 shows.
So he's trying to do segments. He has voicemails. And I don't even know if I included any of the... I mentioned Donahue earlier. He wanted this to be like a Donahue show. Mm-hmm. Literally, they have a guy, his producer or whoever, goes into the crowd with a microphone and is like, hey, what's your question for Joe? And in Joe's mind, it's going to be like, hey, you know, I got into it with my wife similarly to you. And how did you deal with this, you know, sort of this toxic anger that you dealt with, whatever. Instead, the questions were all, hey, Jim, can you do Chip for us? So the ending does not even go how Joe wants, but he's trying to, you know, take phone calls and play some of these voicemails and things. And I don't know how much prep he did on this because the results are a little odd.
Yeah, this is the last clip from this show, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, we have one more.
Okay, so I think this is what we're talking about, where it's definitely the last clip for one of these gentlemen.
Yep.
I actually think this is one of Anthony's fans here.
Oh, shit.
How long does it take for a phone call?
We got volume here?
Good morning, Joe. It's Chris.
Turn that up.
Good morning, Joe. It's Chris. As per your request, take 2 of the Anthony Cumia Christmas carols. We can all slow down and enjoy this beautiful holiday season. Trump to the world, Donald has
Take care, Joe.
If the audio listeners couldn't tell, Artie has had enough, and he just literally got up and left.
He stood up, dropped his mic on the ground, and walked away.
Now, I said something at the beginning of that, or heard something at the beginning of that clip. Remember I said where I don't think Joe did show prep. I don't know if he listened to these voicemails before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I picked up on something. Tell me if you caught this. The guy says, Joe, as per your request, this is take 2. So it sounds to me, maybe I'm reaching here. It sounds to me like maybe this guy's audio was bad and Joe called him back and said, hey, could you leave that song again?
So he would do shit like that. And like, if you left a bad comment on any of his things or any of that, he'll reach out to just about everybody to try to sway them back.
Yeah. So that we'll get into now that we're done with the clips here. But like I said, after Artie left, it lasted for another 10 or 15 minutes of them trying to get like fan questions. It went disastrously. But that call, if he did in fact call that guy back and say, could you leave another voicemail? That perfectly encapsulates why this went so disastrously for Joe Matarese. Because I realize maybe I didn't set this up well enough.
This is like having WATP happen to your face.
Yes. Yeah, right. That's a perfect way to say it. Who Are These Podcasts has abducted your show, but in real time by 3 of the greatest comedians. So I don't know if I set this up properly, because my worry now is that people are going to have listened to this whole thing and think, is Mike just listening to one of his favorite episodes of a show or something? I don't get it. But no, because this led to I figured we would kind of watch it the same way we watched, Eddie Murphy's special or something like that, where we pick out the best moments. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, the reason I'm comparing this to the likes of Eddie Murphy's Delirious is because it essentially took over Joe Matarese's life for the next, I would say, 2 years, roughly.
More than that.
Where the trolls, for lack of a better term, were obsessed with Matarese. And everything he posted, they would just fucking eviscerate. Right. And then he became the focus of a porcelain documentary called, if you're looking for the first one, it is called An Inconvenient Goof. Which particularly focuses on this era of Joe Matarese. And then he did 2 follow-up documentaries focused on Joe called Italian Psycho. And I believe the third is called Welcome to the Podcast.
Yeah, because he goes on.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, he does the full interview, but there's also a documentary paired with it called Welcome to the Podcast.
Which I give him so much credit for going on that fucker's
Matarese eventually went on, and, you know, as is always the case, Porcelain was not nearly as brutal to his face as he is, because there's a couple things with that.
You gotta respect him.
You could call that like being a pussy or whatever, like, oh, say it to his face. But there is also a way you interact with people when you're trying to be entertaining versus trying to have a conversation with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if I was talking to Brendan Schaub, I wouldn't be breaking down every word he says and mocking him for a slip up. If I'm talking to him in private, I'm not like, hey, you fucked that word up, or that wasn't funny, or this or that. You're trying to communicate like a human being.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So there is an element of that as well. And that's what guys like Joe weren't able to realize. And to be fair, this is somewhat early. You know, I know it's only 5 years ago. That's still somewhat early in the great landscape of social media, where particularly guys Joe's age, in their late 40s, early 50s, are not used to this type of interaction with a fan base, particularly not your own fan base, people that only know you from goofing on you. So, you know, Joe's life kind of devolved, and it started to affect his marriage and all these things that Porcelain documents.
Oh, yeah.
We can get into it. We can do part 2 of this.
Right about this time period, too, like right after this all happened, he came to the area and my buddy opened for him. And I was like, oh, that's nice. He's got a lot of butt. I'm sure it'll be a good show. He made him sell at least 20 tickets or else he couldn't perform.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because I don't think that translates into live performance dollars, because
well, that's fucking bullshit, dude. If you're going to come tour, you better fucking be able to tour.
I'm not sure who you're mad at.
I just thought I didn't like that. It's like you can have him on. He'll bring whoever he can, obviously, or I don't know.
Oh, I misunderstood. He wants your buddy to bring 20 people?
Yeah, to open for him. And if he doesn't sell 20 tickets,
I misunderstood that. I'm sorry.
I forget the number. I hated it though. I was like, dude, sell your own shit or have someone else open.
Yeah, that's unusual for a headliner.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the reason that guys like Stuttering John and Brendan Schaub and Joe Matarese have a tough time with the internet is because they can't figure out how to interact with it. And I think Joe eventually did.
I know something.
I think
like
Matarese, like we said, he did the interview with Porcelain. I think he eventually kind of understood some of it. And also, Joe seems like a nice guy.
Yes.
He doesn't handle a lot of shit well, but based on at least what I've seen, he seems like a decent dude that means well and doesn't want to hurt anyone.
So my only thing about that is his first reaction to getting his balls busted is to try to cut people's throats for real without humor, which makes me think he's not maybe as great as he tries to come off as.
Possibly, but that could also be just not knowing what the fuck to do. You know what I mean? Like,
dude,
that could be just an irrational knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, dude, yeah, but your marital status stinks. Wicked. All right.
But I think the difference between Joe Matarese and a guy like Stuttering John is I don't think Stuttering John is a particularly nice or good guy necessarily.
I make $1,000 a day.
But also, even if Matarese isn't or whatever, Stuttering John doesn't have the ability to pretend to be either. Like, Stuttering John doesn't have the ability to kind of join in on the joke and understand what's funny about it because he has zero self-awareness. Right. And that's why, and I mentioned this on Who Are These Podcasts when I was on, that is why I think the Joe Matarese beating eventually relented. If you go on Joe Matarese's social media right now, maybe you'll find some comments that are kind of shitty, but it's not the onslaught that he was getting for a long time.
Right.
Whereas with John, it seems endless. Well, it seems like there's no end in sight.
Him going on the Porcelain thing relieved him of a ton of shit.
And that's why it was interesting because I told Carl, I said, I hope I hope one day the Stuttering John thing ends with Carl and Shuley and John clinking their Coors Lights bottles together and doing a live show. And Carl said, he's like, I don't know if I could do that because John's been such an asshole. And then like, there's no fun in it anymore.
True.
So it's an interesting tug of war between the trolls and their victims, I guess. Do we also have the clip of him on Jim and Sam real quick?
Yeah, this is our last clip. It's called Aftermath.
Yeah, so this is just a brief description of kind of what happened and what Joe dealt with right after that. And this didn't end for some time.
I think that was another learning experience going through this, whatever it is, 10, 14 days since it really started escalating, is that people are all hearing information on the internet, and that you realize when it's happening to you, holy shit, how many times have I been wrong thinking shit about a famous person or a non-famous person that they're writing shit about? So there were so many miscommunications that I was like, I'm sitting here trying to do the posting the podcast with an explanation on it. Not enough people are getting that. That didn't work. Then someone steals the video out of a subscription feed. That's where a lot of my anger came from. Like, I got a wife and kids, okay? So I'm trying to do things to make money. I mean, I don't know, like Anthony, it's funny. Like, he's like, yeah, just laugh it off. I'm like, you're making a lot of money. Like, I'm a guy that's busting his fucking ass. I'm proud of what I do. And, I gotta support my family. I mean, that was another thing that they just kept coming at. You're the stay-at-home dad. I'm like, I wish I was. I'm not really.
This is my job, the thing.
I have a job. Yeah. Like, I'm at a comedy club right now as you're saying this. Where's this? Stay-at-home dad would be easy. This is stay-at-home dad and running a business, which is what a comedian has to do.
Yeah.
So.
I forget. That's an angle on it. I forgot that, I'm glad we played that because it sparked my memory that part of the reason for a lot of the vitriol, or whatever you want to call it, what inspired a lot of the anger from Reddit and Twitter and all these places was that Joe charged money for this. Joe put it behind a paywall and said, hey, if you want to watch Artie, Anthony, and Jimmy beating the shit out of me, you got to pay $5 or $10, whatever the hell it was.
He was ahead of the curve.
It's interesting. It's so interesting to hear that because it's like the example I always use listening to Brian Gumbel talk about the internet, where he's like, I had this subscription service. I think it's called, is it Patreon or like he was kind of early on this and people weren't used to it. So they were like, hey, fuck you for trying to make a buck off of this. Whereas I think now, like, say this happened to us where we had some big guest on who really beat the shit out of us. And I was like, hey, guys, you're going to see us fucking humiliated. I'm embarrassed by it, but you guys will get a kick out of it. It's on the Patreon now. Go subscribe. I don't think anyone would give us an ounce of shit for that, would they?
No.
Yeah, so it's interesting, just 5-6 years ago, whatever this was, how much times have changed where Joe did that and they were like, fuck you. And now literally every comic with a podcast has a Patreon.
So like the amount of attention it was getting, I think his one mistake, like if we were doing something that was getting talked about on every Reddit that we would ever think about going on, I'm pretty sure we would release it.
I think it would be, yes, I would release it for free, for sure. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
But again, if it's something I was embarrassed about, maybe I would say, hey, give me a few bucks for it. I don't know. Like, put it this way. My point is, it's not an unreasonable thing that he did. It was just people weren't used to it at the time. So they really lashed out at this poor fucker.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he was the focus of Red Bar, which Mike David might be a guy we can get into at some point. Maybe more on the Patreon. It seems like that's probably a niche topic as well.
I feel like he's like he does this kind of a thing or a WATP type thing, but with hate behind his words.
He is evil Carl.
Yeah.
Mike David does Who Are These Podcasts with an angry slant.
Yes.
But so he focused on Matarese, and like I said, it inspired 3 very well done documentaries. And also, if it leads you anywhere, check out Porcelain's documentaries and Beige Frequency, because they both have some very interesting, well done stuff on comedy.
Yeah, I think it was Beige Frequency, Beige, whatever it's called. He did a video after Shane's special came out. I think it was him.
Mm-hmm.
And normally those, Whenever they make a video, it's not good for whoever the subject
It's not
is.
good news, yeah.
And it was praising him for how good the special was. And I was listening to Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast, and he was like, I literally changed my afternoon. I made my girlfriend leave, and then I went to watch this because he thought it was going to be terrible.
Like, yeah, well, he makes points where you're like, holy shit, I didn't even think of that. He broke down Brendan Schaub's first special in a way that, like, I used when we broke down Brendan Schaub's special. It sparked notes that he had where I was like, oh, I wouldn't have, if it wasn't for Beige Frequency, I wouldn't have known the Asian accent Brendan Schaub was doing was a real guy that speaks perfect English.
I got that. That was big on Twitter for when it first went down.
Oh, yeah. See, I didn't realize that until I saw Beige Frequency. But anyways, those guys are very interesting. So if you guys are interested in this world that we're talking about, if this was fun for you or interesting, please let me know. And if it wasn't interesting, keep it to yourself. No, feel free to tell me. I don't care. But I am curious on feedback just because if we want to expand it to things like this, there's a ton of episodes we could do, but I just don't know if the regular Why You Laughing listeners will be into it or not.
Funny is funny. Expand your brains.
Yeah, it could be a Patreon thing or whatever, but we'll gauge the reaction and go from there. But if you want to subscribe to that Patreon, you know where to go?
BlindMike.net.
That's correct. BlindMike.net. That's where you can find the Patreon, the free links to the podcast, all that good stuff. If you want to support the Craigster, then go to verygoodshow.org. We mentioned Very Good Show earlier. They have a Patreon as well, or you can listen to their free podcast. So support all the shows. If you would be so kind, we would appreciate it and grow this. Oh, also subscribe on YouTube because pretty soon we can start receiving, as Stuttering John would say, super chats. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube, and we'll start doing more stuff on there as well. And we'll talk to you guys next time on the next Why You Laughing?